Hello, everyone. This is Christina Osborne with ISO Stakeholder Affairs. I'd like to welcome you to the call to provide an update on the Day-Ahead Market Enhancements Initiative. Also on the call, we have Don Trethewey. He's actually the policy lead for DAME. He's going to be providing the update, and he'll go over next steps. So we are recording the call today. We will make that recording available out on the industry webpage once we receive it from AT&T. There are quite a few other ISO representatives on the phone. I'm not going to introduce all of them, but they are listed in the panelist. They are on the panelist list on the right side of the screen, and so they'll be helping, responding to questions. They'll help respond to questions. So we will take questions. We have a very brief presentation. We'll have ample time to respond to questions. So if you do have a question, you can raise your hand by pressing #2, and please start by introducing yourself. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Don.
Good morning, everyone. So we are here to give an update on the day-ahead market enhancements and discuss some of the issues we've identified with the previous multi-iteration formulation that we had discussed with you earlier. And then what we're looking to do in terms of an updated proposal. So we continue to iterate in the straw proposal phase here. I would note that since we moved the implementation out to fall of 2022 for the day-ahead market enhancements, that this additional development of straw proposals hasn't impacted the current implementation date for the day-ahead market enhancements. So if we move to the next slide, please. And given that it is a short presentation, I think I'll walk through all the material and then I'll open it up for questions. So we have been doing some testing of the iterative multi-pass approach that we discussed with stakeholders previously and have been unable to converge the solution from the first pass, which is the fully coupled reliability energy approach, with the final results leading to significant inefficiencies in terms of what comes out as the final result of the multi-interval approach. And this occurs because the reliability capacity can change between the requirement of that can change between the passes. And there's also this interaction with the virtual supply and physical supply, which causes the solution to oscillate around, which means you can get multiple solutions. And then we've also tried to address some of these concerns by holding the unit commitment fixed between the various iterations, and that has not resulted in improvements. In fact, we've actually seen even more inefficient resources by being restrictive with regards to the unit commitment. So it really comes down to that in order to get to an efficient solution, maybe not the same level of efficiency as assuming a fully coupled approach, but we really need to get to a fixed requirement, which leads you to a sequential approach. So let me walk through that a little bit in terms of what we're looking to flush out for you in the next paper. So it's important to remember that reliability capacity is needed to address any differences between the cleared physical supply and the KISO's net load forecast. And there's drivers of reliability capacity up and drivers of reliability capacity down. These all can net against each other, but let's look at what can drive the need for up. So if bid-in load clears less than the KISO's forecast, then you need to have reliability capacity up because you need additional physical supply. If virtual supply clears the market, likewise you would need to replace that with physical supply. And if the variable energy resources are clearing greater than the KISO's forecast, then there's not a belief that those will generate at that level, so you need additional upward capability. The drivers of reliability down are when bid-in load clears higher than the KISO forecast, so that's resulted in too much generation, physical generation being cleared in the IFM, when virtual demand clears the market, or when cleared variable energy resources clear less than the KISO forecast. And this is known, it's basically a chicken and egg problem it's known after the integrated forward market the exact amount of reliability capacity that's needed. We move to the next slide, please. So we do need to come up with, a different approach to address operations need for biasing the residual unit commitment process. If RUC performed its pure purpose, it would be meeting the reliability capacity needs that I discussed in the previous slide. But in order to get ramp capability and to address uncertainty between the day-ahead and the real-time market, in order for operations to get additional unit commitment to meet those operational needs, they've had to increase the RUC load forecast in order to get that. So in order to address, and that's because there isn't a product in the integrated forward market that is providing that service, which would eliminate the need for the load biasing. So we are looking to add the imbalance reserve up and down to the integrated forward market to meet that operational need. This then allows us to return RUC back to its original purpose, which is to basically commit for reliability capacity, but we also want to make enhancements to the current process. So we will use it to prepare reliability capacity up. However, unlike the RUC process today, we will also have the ability to provide reliability capacity down. It also will be able to establish the export and import energy schedules that can be tagged for checkout and establish their real-time priorities, as well as establishing the binding MSG configuration. We would set that based upon the RUC schedule on a physical basis. So we will be, again, fleshing out the details of this proposal in our next paper for you. So this approach does decouple the energy and reliability capacity by maintaining a separate IFM and RUC. And so IFM is a purely financial energy market. It clears that bid-in demand against bid-in supply, but it's important that it also meets 100% of the ancillary services requirements and includes the imbalance reserve requirement, which is where we put in 100% of the KISO's forecast, but we procure it using a demand curve. And then if necessary, RUC would provide additional unit commitment to ensure that physical supply is available in real time to meet the KISO's net load forecast. And so again, by removing the load biasing need for addressing uncertainty and ramping, we will get added efficiencies we'll get additional efficiencies by having that removed from the RUC process, and then we can more precisely determine the efficiency gains that could be increased by integrating the IFM and RUC, and we can look at that in the future. We move to the next slide. Let's go back one, and then I'll pause and take questions on the material I've just reviewed.
Okay, great. So if you do have a question, you can raise your hand by pressing #2. Ethan, let me know if anybody enters the queue.
Nope, we do have one in the queue already. I'll go ahead and put them through now. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Don. It's Aditya from SC. How are you doing?
Very good.
Thanks. So thank you for this update. I had a question. SE had provided alternatives on 2 different sets of comments in August as well as in March. Have you given any consideration to those alternatives? We've given several alternatives in terms of formulation.
We have reviewed the various alternatives. I'll be honest and admit that I couldn't recall offhand what your proposal was, so I'm happy to go back and take a look at it later.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, if the KISO could provide some kind of written opinion on the various alternatives, that would help. Especially because we've been very involved in this for quite a while, and with so many formulations not working, we were hoping that at least some of the alternatives we provided could be discussed among stakeholders and worked as feasible alternatives.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Ethan, do we have anybody else in the queue?
Yeah, we have a couple others. I'll go ahead and move on to the next caller. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello, Don. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. This is Alva Svoboda from PG&E. So I understand saying now is that there will be enhancements to the IFM process to procure upward and downward reserves, and then there will continue to be a RUC phase, which looks much like the current RUC phase in the market. Is that correct?
Correct. With some enhancements, including the down product and potentially other changes to improve that output as well.
So there'll be some additional description of what those enhancements to RUC would be. What I was wondering about was how this sort of interacts with the way in which we had quite a bit of discussion about the requirement to bid all RA in at zero, and it sounds to me like if you had a RUC process, you would be preserving that requirement in order to be able to run that process, but it's possible not. I just wanted to find out what your thoughts were on that piece of it, and also on the must offer requirements that proceed from all of these markets.
Yeah. So I think we do think that there are benefits of having reliability capacity and imbalance reserves for those to be economically bid, reflecting the availability costs of the resources. So we do think that that's is a significant market enhancement, that we would want all resources, including RA, to do that. I do recognize that there may be the need for a transition period where they continue to bid zero for some period of time to get experience and comfort with the introduction of these new products. And then so we are developing, one of the elements of the proposal is a proposed transition period to where we would move from where RA resources initially bid zero for these new products, but at some point all resources would then bid their availability costs.
Okay, that'll be very helpful. And then the other sort of following consequence was you had talked about not requiring RA resources to bid into real time if they didn't receive any awards in the process you were previously arguing for. Would that also possibly be something that might be changed in the new proposal so that you would require RA resources to bid into the real-time markets?
I think after the transition period, I think we would not want to have the RA resources having that requirement to bid into real time. Again, you know,
so you have a transition period.
Yeah, I think, and so I think in that transition period, you would maintain the current RA construct of bidding zero and having a real time must offer obligation. But after the end of the transition period, there would be non-zero capacity bids, and the real-time move would become a function of your imbalance reserves or reliability capacity awards.
Okay. It sounds like I'm curious as to whether that transition from the sort of like first phase of this to the second would be based on sort of performance metrics, or whether you would just set a timeline for it. I mean, do you think that this is just people getting used to something, or because I think some of the pushback on this was based on the possibility that this might lead to some bad results, or it would also interact poorly with how contracts are currently set up. Are you planning on leaving enough time essentially for contracts to be renegotiated when you define this transition period, or what's your thinking on that?
So the current thinking on the transition period is, it's important that once you move to an EDAM construct, under that paradigm, that requiring RA resources to bid zero could lead to basically, and then not requiring other balancing authority areas to bid zero for their RA-like resources. You could see to where CAISO RA resources are more economic to support reliability capacity and imbalance reserves than other resources. So I think what we've been looking at the timing for the end of the transition period would be January 1st prior to an August or prior to an April, spring go live where you start onboarding EIM entities into the day-ahead market.
Okay, I understand your argument. And I do think that you'd want to have some, strong assurance, or market participants within CAISO would want to have some strong assurance that they weren't going to be adversely affected by that change, and you'd want to have gained that evidence in this transition period. Would you agree with that? That you'd want to actually see in that period that you're not going to have adverse effects to participants within CAISO from that transition?
I'm not sure where you're going with that. I mean, I think the period between where the RA resources, the RA rules remain sort of unchanged. That during that portion of the transition period, I do think that that's why one of the benefits of that was to be able to see how the imbalance reserves and reliability capacity interact. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to see the full way that they work because, when everybody bids the same price, it's almost a random number generator in terms of who you can award to. But I do think it would address address some of that concern and give some time for the contract negotiations. But with regards to the contract negotiations, I would really highlight that this isn't new that we think that there's deficiencies from no longer having the RUC requirement to be bidding zero. So I think people should be, when looking at contracts, should be considering that's been our long-term goal.
Right. I'm not speaking for PG&E. I'm just saying it's not so much that aspect of it as, to me, the question in respect to our recent blackouts, whether releasing contracts from real time has more of a negative effect under extreme conditions.
I understand that. So I do understand that. So I think that's where potentially we could do some simulations or analysis around testing this in an extreme event and see how it behaves. So
that sounds like a good approach. Thank you very much, Don. Appreciate your answers to my questions.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to our next caller. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Don. This is J.K. Wang from PG&E.
Morning.
Can you hear me? Good morning. Yeah, I just have a simple question. When you said the drivers for the RUC are the demand, are you referring to the load plus export or only the load?
The load. Again, that's where there's scheduling priorities that are enforced in the reliability unit commitment process that make determinations on who has the highest priority in terms of using that physical supply. So very similar to the clarifications we put in place on September 5th.
I see. So does that mean that in the case export clear the market again, it will not be identified as a trigger in the RUC?
So to the extent that virtual supply cleared and that allowed an export that's not tied to a non-RA resource to clear as well, you would then that export schedule would be informed that the tag amount, with the energy schedule it can tag and the priority it would have going into real time is based upon those RUC results, not the IFM schedule results.
Okay, but let's say if the virtual supply does not clear the market, it's only the under schedule that caused the export clear the market, will there be any other triggers that we can use to identify?
So similar to the September 5th stuff that was put in that instance, you would see that internal load, meeting the load forecast, has a higher priority than giving a RUC energy schedule to the export. And so in the same situation as the virtual supply, that export would be not allowed to tag for checkout purposes and for real-time scheduling priority at its IFM award. It would be done at its RUC award.
Okay, thank you very much. And my second question is on slide 7, when you say RUC will provide additional unit commitment, is that part, like the additional amount, is the same as the load biasing that we will have in the RUC, or that will be separate?
Well, so the current biasing being done to get ramp capability and to address uncertainty, that will now be procured through the integrated forward market by including imbalance reserves up and down in that market. And so then when we get to RUC, all we're doing there is committing additional resources to the extent that's needed to bridge the gap between the clear physical supply in the IFM and the CAISO's net load forecast.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all my questions.
You're welcome.
Alrighty, moving on to our next question. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Don. This is Kate Pollack from the CPUC Energy Division. Just a quick question
Morning.
for you. Can you hear me? Morning.
Yes,
so
I can.
given that the solution CAISO was proposing in DAME isn't converging, which will likely lead to a policy direction change, and given the extent to which DAME and EDAM are interrelated, do you have a sense of whether CAISO may opt to delay the Bundle 1 EDAM comments, which are currently due on the 12th of November?
I was not planning to delay the EDAM comment. I think there's been significant work I think that people have put in on those. I think there's, we extended them before so that people could reflect upon the August event. One of the reasons why we're providing this update is that people can now know that we had some issues with the previous formulation. So I wasn't planning on extending them.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks a lot for the clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ethan, do we have others in the queue?
Yep, we have 2 more.
Yeah.
Caller, you are now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hey, Don. It's Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. So obviously we're very happy with this proposal. Thanks for the update. Just a few questions. The first one is, in your next paper, would you mind adding a section on RUC details, including the September 5th clarifications? And we've been getting a lot of questions from WPTF members on exports and what's happening with their schedules. So a lot of additional transparency on that would be really helpful.
No problem.
Cool, thanks.
Don,
and then, go ahead.
This is Guillermo. Yes, let me add some comments. Clearly, yesterday in the VPM discussion, we indicated to the market participants that we're going to initiate a couple of workshops to go over the current practice that we have, including the priorities and the curtailments and treatment of exports. So that would be the right place to have that type of discussion. So you can just wait for a market notice for that to come.
Okay, that's great to hear, Guillermo. Thank you. Yeah, I think if we could coordinate those workshops too with perhaps needed RUC enhancements to provide more transparency around export schedules, I think those will connect in a really nice way. So I appreciate that the workshops are coming. And then the next question is on MSG resources. If you use the MSG out of RUC, it seems like there'd be a potential if RUC decked them for an MSG unit to not be able to be in the right configuration to meet their day-ahead schedule. So I was just wondering if you could make really explicit in the paper about how you're going to handle both RUC inks for MSG and RUC decks for MSG.
Okay.
And then finally, just a clarification question. When you were talking earlier about the real-time MOO, is that going to be included in this initiative now, or is that still in RA enhancements?
Well, it's in both of them because they're both interdependent on each other. So the RA would set the requirement in terms of the capacity rules and bidding rules that RA resources have. And then to the extent, right now, since we don't have imbalanced reserves, we can't, of course, get rid of a real-time move from the RA construct. But once we've put in place the imbalanced reserves and the reliability capacity, then we're covering the full amount that, based on the day-ahead forecast and the historical uncertainty that we've observed, that we've got sufficient physical resources available to the real-time market where we could then no longer have the real-time move.
But I appreciate that both proposals are needed. I was just wondering what tariff filing it will be in, or is it going to be some sort of integrated tariff filing?
I'm not exactly sure how we would do that. I would think it would probably be in the RA tariff filing, but it could be either or.
Okay. Thanks so much, John. And again, we're just really pleased with the direction that CAISO is going in here.
Okay, thanks.
Ethan, do we have anybody else in the queue?
Yes, we got a couple more that popped in as well.
Okay.
Caller, you are now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hey, Don. This is Mike Castellano from the California Public Utilities Commission. I have a couple things. One, I'd like to back up a little bit of what Carrie said, that a lot more detail about RUC will be good. I am aware that you guys are doing, as Guillermo said, those workshops, but I also would say that continuing to discuss the impacts of export situations and all the different penalty parameters in RUC as you're modifying RUC is very important. So I don't think we should talk about not including that in this process. But more importantly, maybe.
Mike, sorry, Mike. I'm going to point out that's why I was highlighting we're looking at making enhancements, and of course we'll document all of those enhancements in the policy development process.
All right, thanks, Don. So the kind of more important thing here is, as I know you are very much aware, you guys have made a couple really big changes to the DAME proposals based on sort of optimization and computing situations that were discovered after some development. There was a 15-minute granularity proposal years ago, and then there was this recent one with all this sort of fun back and forth between these iterations and reliability capacity. So what I'm a little bit worried about as we're investing all this time in EDAM is, do we know that you guys will be able to solve, you guys or whoever will be able to solve the EDAM market in an appropriate amount of time? That's going to be a much bigger problem than it currently is, I think. And just given the situation, it would be nice to have something more robust in terms of confirmation for EDAM to move forward before we spend a lot of time on it.
What I would point out on the EDAM is that we're currently solving the EIM footprint, in a 5-minute market, which is significantly less solve time than a day-ahead market is. So, as with anything, we do evaluate the performance on that. But I would point to the fact that the EIM, even as we've continued to grow the footprint of the EIM, that we've continued to maintain sufficient real-time performance, and so I would expect the same day ahead.
Okay, but I'm just saying it would be really nice. We expected and we took the ISO's word at previous iterations of the DAME proposals that there weren't going to be any problems with solution situations, and those kind of fell apart. So I understand what you're saying. I do think the day ahead is more complicated in a lot of ways. In EIM, you're not scheduling export and import transactions. I know you have a lot of the binary variables in there, but you're in function not really committing or decommitting all that much. So, there are certainly differences. So just.
Okay.
Thanks.
Go to the next question, Ethan.
Of course. Moving on. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hey, this is Michelle Keto, also from the CPUC. Just two things that I wanted to note. The first is, there's a lot of talk about the imports and exports, and I just wonder if there's a way that CAISO could provide more transparency. So I know in OASIS, the EIM transfers, both directions are shown. Would it be possible for CAISO to also show by tie the exports and imports as opposed to the net imports? I feel like that would go a long way to increasing transparency.
Can I make a request that you submit that as either a city ticket or send me a note, and I can get it in there, and that way we can get you a response on that?
Yeah, you know what? Sorry, I don't do city, but I'd be happy to send you a note. I think I already sent one to Delphine. I just wanted to raise this as a pretty important issue for us. So that's one thing.
Okay.
And then the second thing is I just want to talk about this idea of the timing of the contract negotiations or renegotiations. So when you're renegotiating contracts, I would imagine that you understand the value of each of the products. So, I mean, you would renegotiate the contract because you've paid for the capacity and what you thought were all the attributes, but now the attributes are going to be monetized in the market, so there might be an additional capacity payment. So you would imagine that you would want to renegotiate the contract downward. But how do you do that if you have no sense of what the product is worth? Because the product doesn't exist, really.
Well, I think what it is today, the suppliers have to reflect in their capacity offers the fact that they have a real-time must-offer obligation, and they don't know how often they're going to actually be called on in real time, and there is some cost associated with that. There is, to the extent that there's marginal cost associated with that, it's more efficient to actually have the supplier reflect that in an offer to the CAISO, and the CAISO clear it. That way, what's paid for is when and if it's needed at the right place, covering the highest marginal cost resource, leading to profits for anyone who has a lower availability cost than that.
And have you done this?
It's more about knowing your cost than it is about knowing what the price you're going to be paid for it in real time.
So then what do you imagine they're renegotiating in the contract renegotiations?
The fact that they're no longer having to make a monthly estimate of how often they're going to incur a cost associated with being available 24/7 when they only have to incur that cost if they're available on when they're awarded imbalance reserves or reliability capacity.
And what kind of costs do you think those are?
The cost of securing gas, and with the probability that you may not actually be able to call on it and have to sell it back at some price different than what you bought it for previously.
And how many people do you think? Sorry, and how many people do you think buy long-term gas contracts?
It would even occur on a short-term gas contract as well. So again, it's really about, to the extent that there's a marginal cost, it's more efficient to get it through the market than to buy it on a monthly basis when you don't know the probabilities that you're going to use it.
And have you done any work on how much more efficient it is and why you think it's more efficient?
Kind of again, I think it's the theoretical argument that shows the economic theory really that to the extent that you have a marginal cost, it's more efficient to procure it through a market than to buy it for a monthly basis when you know you're not going to use it every single interval.
Right, but then, I just feel like we go from theory to practice in kind of weird ways. Like the theory is that, everyone's bidding their marginal cost, and now we're all talking about scarcity pricing, and now we're sort of, right in the middle, we kind of switch paradigms, and I'm just afraid that that's going to occur here as well. So if you aren't really thinking about what marginal cost and we're not actually enforcing any of the cost-based bidding, then, the theoretical pretty soon breaks down. So that's all I'll just make that point. Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle, the only thing I would add to it, one of the key design elements that we're introducing with these new capacity products, since we do ensure that they're deliverable within the transmission system, is we will have market power mitigation associated with these new products.
Right. Well, I would just say that your market power mitigation for, well, anyway, it seems like I just read the WEC soft offer cap filings, and, you know, market power mitigation seems a little weak at this point, but thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we have still a couple of questions keep coming through, so we have 2 more in the queue at this time. Caller, you are now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Don. This is Laura Trelease with the Bonneville Power Administration. And
Good morning.
Laura, your line is dropped.
hi, Don. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay, we can.
Sorry about that. I got muted and unmuted again. I think I want to just start by saying that I understand the urgent need to get the imbalance reserve product up and going and the importance of that to the CAISO BA, and that this is an incremental improvement to CAISO's current day-ahead market structure. I think where there remains quite a bit of questions and concerns is how this sequential approach is extendable to an EDAM, and the single optimization has really been a pretty foundational element for EDAM in our view, and a lot more discussion I think needs to happen to really understand all the implications of moving to continuing with a sequential approach and how that might be extended. And so I think I'm not recommending that the implementation of imbalance reserves be delayed, and that, but I guess I'm wondering if there's openness from the CAISO to include the looking at integrating IFM and RUC as part of the EDAM stakeholder process in one of the bundle topics.
So I do think that as we look forward to an EDAM construct, I think understanding how this design works from the IFM and the enhancements to RUC, that we want to assess that and then still be open to the extent that those changes under a EDAM construct need to be further enhanced. We would need to look through it through an EDAM process. I can't say what bundle it would go into. You know, I think I would make that assessment after I review the stakeholder comments that we get and see where things are there.
Thanks. I can appreciate that. I'll just note that for us, it's really important that it's explicitly included in one of the bundles, and so I just wanted to note that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, moving on to our next and what appears to be final question. Carl, you are unmuted. Please go ahead. Caller, please ensure that your device is unmuted as well.
Sorry about that. Josh Arnold, PG&E. I was indeed on mute. So, Don, I wanted to follow up on Michelle's comments real quick. This is regards to your statements about having to renegotiate. You're expecting contract renegotiations. I'm very concerned by the amount of assumptions and theory that you guys keep tossing around as if it were an actual fact. That in theory something might be more cost effective, but if you don't know the contracts, you're just stating a hypothesis that may not match to the data. It may not match to reality. And I get a really bad feeling every time you guys in this process have talked about renegotiating contracts, because I remember the last time we had to do that for flexible RA, and it took years to renegotiate all those contracts to get you the flexible RA that you had asked for. Now, at the time, it made sense, and it still does. You guys made a really good presentation and argument for why FlexRA would provide immediate reliability benefits. And let's be honest, reliability is, at the end of the day, the foundational need for the system. So we went through that process. It was long-term. Like I said, took years, took a lot of person hours, a lot of cost. If you're going to keep with the theory, however, of renegotiated contracts and bidding costs as you've put forward after a phase-out period, after a transition period. I'd really like you guys to separate from the theory and actually talk to the people who are doing contracts, look at what's going on in the market, not just yours, but in the broader market. And I'd also really like you guys to very clearly articulate what this process gives you that you don't already get with flexible RA. Because that's one of the problems I've been sort of trying to think through. And I can see some benefits, but I'm not sure that the benefits you're describing are really going to materialize to the extent that you're thinking in terms of value and benefit.
The concern we have is the fact that we're having to bias RUC to get two attributes that we could get in more efficiently in IFM, and that's some ramping capability and additional unit commitment to cover uncertainty. And so that's what we want to get that into and have a more efficient day-ahead market. And
okay.
We don't want to. We acknowledge that when there's market design changes, that there can be impacts to contracts and changes in, for instance, the resource adequacy RA move requirement may have changes associated with it. And that's why we provide transition periods. But we can't let contracts prevent us from moving forward, integrating larger amounts of renewables and meeting the policy objectives of the state.
This is true, but what I'm saying is if the driver for the contract renegotiation is economic theory that doesn't align with reality, that's a lot of time and money.
Yeah,
and that's where. Okay. I may not have. I was going to say I may not have communicated my concern effectively, but yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I'm not saying that economic theory around the contract negotiations. What I'm our discussion there was, why is it more efficient to buy if something has a marginal cost through a market than through a bilateral contract? So that's what I was referring to.
Right, and my point back to that is you're making assumptions about how these contracts are dealing with those processes. You're talking about buying gas on a monthly basis, and that doesn't really jive with my understanding of a lot of these contracts. You're talking about the generator buying gas. Well, that doesn't jive with all contracts either. In some cases, it's the buyer's responsibility to purchase gas for the unit. So there's a lot of nuance to this. I understand that this is supposed to be a quick update meeting. I was going to hold off until we got the actual paper to go through it in more detail in December, but I just feel like there's a lot of assumption about contractual behavior, about bidding behavior, and there may be benefit here. There really may be an economic and market benefit, and even perhaps a reliability benefit, but I haven't seen that effectively communicated yet, and now you're talking about the need to renegotiate contracts or the expectation that contracts will be renegotiated. It's easy for you to say. It's not so easy for those of us on the other side who have to then go through that process.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Ethan, do we have anybody else in the queue?
There are no further questions in the question queue.
Okay. So as far as the next steps for this initiative, we are planning to post a second revised straw proposal beginning of December. We'll ask for, we recognize that the holidays are coming up, so we'll look for comments in mid-January. Once we have the details of, when we'll have when we'll have a meeting and everything, we will send out a public notice with those details. And then we hope to post a draft final proposal in early March of next year, and then take the proposal to the EIM governing body and Board of Governors for decision in May 2021, and then plan to implement fall 2022. Are there any questions on the next steps, or do you have any other questions for Don at this point?
There's still no questions in the queue at this time.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. Again, any activities that we have on this initiative, we will send out a public notice. So with that, go ahead and end the call. Enjoy the rest of your day.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.